In June 1967, a small nation surrounded on nearly every side went to war against three armies at once. Almost everyone expected it to be crushed. Instead, in just 6 days, it won one of the most complete military victories in modern history. How that happened and why it still shapes the region today is one of the most studied campaigns ever fought. This is the Six-Day War. By the spring of 1967, tensions across the Middle East had reached a breaking point. Israel was a young state, small and narrow, bordered by neighbors that did not accept its existence. Egypt, the largest of them, moved its army into the Sinai Desert, massing troops along the frontier. It then closed a vital waterway to Israeli shipping, a move Israel considered an act of war. Across the borders, armies mobilized. Radio broadcasts spoke of the coming battle. In Israel, there was a real fear of being overrun. Surrounded and outnumbered, Israel's leaders made a fateful decision. Rather than wait to be attacked, they would strike first. On the morning of June 5th, the war began not on the ground, but in the sky. In a meticulously planned surprise attack, Israeli aircraft flew low over the sea, beneath radar, and struck Egyptian airfields just as their planes sat on the ground. Wave after wave hit runways and parked aircraft. In a matter of hours, much of the Egyptian Air Force was destroyed before it could even take off. The same fate soon fell on the air forces of the other fronts. By the end of the first day, Israel controlled the skies almost completely. This was the decisive moment. With command of the air, Israeli ground forces could advance while the enemy had no cover from above. The war would last 6 days, but in many ways it had been decided in the first 6 hours. On the ground, the fighting exploded across 3 fronts at once. In the south, armored columns drove deep into the Sinai Desert, racing across open ground toward the Suez Canal. Tank battles raged in the dust and heat. Israeli columns pushed forward faster than their opponents could react. To the east, hard fighting broke out over the hills and the old city at the heart of the region, some of the most intense combat of the war. And in the north, Israeli forces fought their way up a steep, fortified plateau against dug-in defenders. On every front, the pattern repeated. Air superiority, speed, and initiative overwhelmed larger but slower forces. By June 10th, it was over. In 6 days, Israel had defeated 3 armies and seized territory several times its own size. It was a stunning, lopsided victory, studied ever since in war colleges around the world as a masterclass in surprise and air power. But a swift military triumph did not bring peace. The war left Israel occupying lands filled with people and unresolved questions that remain at the center of the conflict today. The territories captured in those 6 days, and the peoples living in them, would shape decades of tension, negotiation, and further war. That is the paradox of the Six-Day War. On the battlefield, it was almost perfect. In its consequences, it opened a chapter that has never fully closed. A war won in 6 days had created problems that 6 decades would not solve. And just 6 years later, the armies that had been so humiliated would return, this time achieving the one thing thought impossible, catching Israel completely by surprise. That's the next story.